The training hall fell silent as the massive doors groaned open. Cadet Jakara felt her scales ripple with anticipation as the instructors led the creature into the arena. She had heard stories about the war beast trials, whispered tales from senior cadets who still bore scars from their encounters. The Galactic Military Academy did not believe in gentle lessons. The war beast emerged from the shadows, and even the most seasoned cadets took an involuntary step backward. It stood nearly 4 meters tall, with obsidian scales that seemed to absorb light itself. 6 muscular limbs ended in claws that could rend steel, and its 3 eyes glowed with an intelligence that was both ancient and terrible. This was a Carveth apex, one of the most dangerous predators ever discovered in the known galaxy. The Academy had spent decades conditioning this particular specimen for one purpose: to test the courage and worthiness of those who would lead troops into battle. Commander Trelvik, a decorated veteran with cybernetic replacements where his right arm used to be, stepped forward. His voice echoed through the hall with practiced authority. "Cadets, you stand before the final trial of your combat assessment. The war beast will approach each of you. It will test you. It will know your fear, your weakness, your very essence. Some of you will stand. Some of you will fall. Those who run will be expelled immediately. Those who attack will fail. You must face it with nothing but your will and your worthiness to command." Jakara watched as the first cadet was called forward. Sergeant Morvan, a Krellian whose species had conquered 3 systems before joining the Galactic Alliance. Krellians were known for their aggressive nature and their pride. Morvan approached with his chest plates expanded, his 4 arms held in a traditional challenge posture. The war beast moved toward him with fluid grace, each step deliberate and measured. When it was within striking distance, it suddenly reared up on its hind limbs and released a roar that shook the reinforced walls. The sound was not just noise, but something primal that spoke directly to the fear centers of every evolved brain. Morvan held his ground, but Jakara could see the trembling in his limbs. The war beast circled him once, twice, its 3 eyes never blinking. Then it lowered its massive head and pressed its snout against Morvan's chest, nearly knocking him over. The Krellian cadet stood firm, his breathing rapid but controlled. After what felt like an eternity, the war beast withdrew and returned to the center of the arena. Morvan had passed, but barely. The medical drones immediately attended to him as he stumbled back to the line, his pride intact, but his confidence visibly shaken. One by one, the cadets faced their trial. The war beast approached each with the same methodical intensity, reading them in ways that no scanner or test could match. Lieutenant Tavara, whose species communicated through electromagnetic pulses, maintained her field stability even as the beast's claws scraped across the floor mere centimeters from her body. Ensign Drac, whose people had evolved on a death world of constant volcanic activity, stood unflinching as superheated breath washed over his armored hide. Each cadet who stood firm passed. 3 cadets ran and were immediately escorted from the hall. Their military careers ended before they had truly begun. Then it was Jakara's turn. She forced her scales to lie flat, suppressing the biological fear response that made her species vulnerable to panic. As she walked to the center of the arena, her training took over. She had survived the atmospheric combat simulations of Vareth Prime. She had endured zero-gravity close-quarters combat training. She had led her squad through the nightmare scenarios that broke even the most hardened soldiers. She would not fail here. The war beast approached, and she understood why so many had broken. Its presence was overwhelming, a concentrated force of pure, predatory power that seemed to reach into her chest and squeeze her heart. Its eyes fixed on her, and she felt exposed in a way that no enemy fire had ever made her feel. The creature leaned close, its hot breath carrying the scent of raw meat and something else, something ancient. It snarled, showing teeth designed to crack starship hulls, and Jakara felt her body scream at her to run. But she held. She stared into those alien eyes and refused to yield. The war beast studied her for a long moment, then moved on. Jakara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. She had passed. Relief flooded through her as she returned to the line, her legs unsteady but her spirit intact. 27 cadets had been tested. 24 had stood their ground. And now only one remained. Cadet Marcus Chen stepped forward, and the hall filled with quiet murmurs. The human was smaller than most of the other species present, lacking natural armor, claws, or any of the physical advantages that evolution had granted the other cadets. Humans were a recent addition to the Galactic Alliance, their homeworld only discovered 40 years ago. They were considered physically weak, emotionally unstable, and bizarrely contradictory in their behavior. Yet somehow, they had been granted entry into the Academy after their unexpected victory in the frontier conflicts, where human tactics and unpredictability had turned a certain defeat into a stunning triumph. Marcus walked with a casual stride that bordered on disrespectful, his hands loose at his sides. He was not wearing the same expression of grim determination that the others had worn. Instead, he looked almost curious. His head tilted slightly as he observed the war beast with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than fear. The war beast's reaction was immediate and unexpected. Its scales rippled in a pattern that the instructors had never seen before. The creature's 3 eyes fixed on the human with an intensity that made even Commander Trelvik tense. Then the war beast did something unprecedented. It charged. The creature closed the distance in 3 massive bounds, moving faster than anything that large should be able to move. Cadets cried out in alarm. Instructors reached for neural suppressors. But before anyone could intervene, the war beast reached Marcus and then, impossibly, stopped. The creature towered over the human, who had not moved, had not flinched, had not even raised his hands in defense. Marcus simply stood there, looking up at the apex predator with those strange human eyes that held both softness and steel. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Marcus did something that no one expected. He smiled and spoke in a quiet voice that somehow carried through the silent hall. "Hey there, big guy. You're beautiful, you know that? Look at you. Magnificent." The war beast's head tilted, mimicking the gesture the human had made moments before. Its scales shifted again, this time in a pattern that the Academy's xenobiologists would later identify as confusion mixed with something else, something they had no name for. Marcus slowly raised one hand, palm open, making no threatening movements. "It's okay," he said softly. "I know what you are. I know what they've done to you, training you to be a weapon, keeping you caged. But I see you, the real you, underneath all that conditioning." What happened next would be discussed in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The war beast, the Carveth Apex, that had been trained to test courage and dominance, that had faced down the fiercest warriors of a dozen species, slowly lowered itself to the ground. Its massive head bowed until its snout touched the floor at Marcus's feet in a gesture of submission that should have been impossible for a creature of pure predatory instinct. Marcus knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the beast, and gently placed his hand on its scarred snout. "Thank you," he whispered, "for showing them, for showing everyone." The war beast remained bowed for another moment, then slowly rose and walked back to its handlers with a docility that left the entire hall in stunned silence. The instructors looked at each other, uncertain how to proceed. This had never happened. There was no protocol for this. Commander Trelvik finally found his voice. "Cadet Chen, explain yourself." Marcus turned to face the commander, and there was something in his expression that made the veteran warrior pause. "Sir, with respect, the test is flawed. You're not measuring courage or worthiness to command. You're measuring who can suppress their fear the longest. But leadership is not about domination or showing no fear. It's about understanding, connection, and respect for all living things, even the ones we've turned into weapons. He gestured toward the war beast, now resting calmly with its handlers. That creature did not bow because I dominated it. It bowed because I acknowledged it. Because I saw it not as a test or an obstacle, but as a living being that deserves recognition. Where I come from, we have a saying. A true warrior respects all life, especially the life of a worthy opponent. That creature is not our enemy. It's been forced into this role. The silence stretched on. Then, unexpectedly, Commander Trelovic began to laugh. It was a deep, genuine sound that few cadets had ever heard from the stern instructor. 20 years, he said, shaking his head. 20 years of running this trial, and it takes a human to show us what we've been measuring wrong. He looked at Marcus with something approaching respect. Your species continues to surprise us, Cadet Chen. You pass. Not because the beast bowed, but because you understood something the rest of us had forgotten. Strength without wisdom is just violence, and courage without compassion is just cruelty. As the cadets filed out of the training hall, Jakara found herself walking beside Marcus. How did you know? She asked. How did you know it would respond that way? Marcus shrugged. That strange human gesture that could mean so many things. I didn't know. But on Earth, we learned a long time ago that predators respect two things: strength and understanding. I couldn't match it in strength, so I offered understanding instead. My ancestors spent thousands of years turning wolves into dogs, not by dominating them, but by forming partnerships with them. We learned that the strongest bonds are built on mutual respect, not fear. Jakara thought about this as they walked. Perhaps that was why humans had survived on their death world, despite being physically weaker than most predators. Perhaps that was why they had won battles they should have lost. Not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the most fearsome, but because they understood something fundamental about connection and respect that other species had overlooked in their pursuit of power. The war beast watched from its enclosure as the cadets departed, its three eyes following the small human figure until he disappeared from view. For the first time in its years of captivity and conditioning, the creature felt something other than the compulsion to test and challenge. It felt what could only be described as recognition, a moment of being seen not as a weapon or a monster, but simply as itself. And in that recognition, something had shifted in the galaxy's understanding of what true strength really meant.